All right, everyone. This is Jed Wonderly with the Utah Sports Report. And today I've got a very special guest with me. Got a gentleman, a young guy, because I'm older and he's definitely younger than me by quite a bit. But when my wife and I were in Boston a couple of weeks ago, we had the opportunity to have dinner at a fantastic Italian restaurant, probably something along the lines Billy Joel wrote the song about. And we got to meet Trey. Trey and Travis were a couple of guys. Travis is a University of Texas at Austin guy, and both of these guys are from Texas. And Trey is going to Harvard, and that's why they were all in Boston. So Trey happens to be majoring in economics, and we had a nice chat about college football. Thankfully, they were college football fans, because if they weren't, we would have ignored them. No, just kidding. But so I've got Trey here with me, and Trey was talking about a blog that he writes, and specifically about an article that he wrote about NIL. So that kind of piqued my interest, along with the fact that he was just a college football fan in general. So Trey, I appreciate you coming on the show, and let's talk a little bit about NIL. What was your impetus in writing that article and getting you interested in NIL?
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you again for having me on the show. This is truly an honor. It's always fun to talk about college football, whether or not it's recorded or not. But yeah, I'm a huge college football fan. I grew up rooting for Texas A&M. It's a rough time to be an A&M fan this year, but
Tough time this year for you guys.
yeah, and
But
hopefully we can.
kudos for you still, admitting that.
Yeah. That is one thing. We are loyal. Good times and very bad. But yeah, I think honestly, maybe it is because I'm an A&M fan, but NIL has certainly turned out to be a pretty significant factor in recruiting and in college football in general, especially with just kind of how crazy everything is right now. But yeah, so I've just been really following the space, partly for the newsletter I write, just kind of talking about the business of college football. And NIL has turned out to be one of the most significant parts of just kind of the business of college football, how it's used in recruiting and maintaining your roster and everything like that. And it's a constantly evolving space right now, with states imposing their own laws for both college and high school levels, but also the NCAA has been consistently kind of updating their own guidance around it. And actually, a few weeks ago, they kind of clarified some things. So NIL has really only been around for a couple of years, but they're really kind of, the initial guidelines were really vague, and so it left a lot of wiggle room for administrators, athletic departments, coaches.
And,
Um,
and when you say wiggle room, we're talking about a lot of room for shenanigans in my thinking.
I'd absolutely agree, and I'm not gonna come out and say that I think that A&M paid for our class like certain other coaches in the SEC might have implied. But I am also not one of the A&M fans that denies any wrongdoing whatsoever, and I'm not even going to say wrongdoing necessarily. I think based on the guidance and the rules around it, I think what A&M did was probably legal, but it just kind of there was certainly NIL deals involved in the recruiting aspect, which, based on kind of the intentions of NIL, it was more so to reward players for being able to make money on brand endorsements, or sign a deal with a shoe company, car company, restaurant, like a local restaurant, bank, anything like that. But really, what it's come down to is it's being used as a recruiting tool, where these collectives of just wealthy school alums are coming together, pulling their money together, and pretty much offering high school recruits these deals to come to their schools. And these deals kind of involve a couple $1 million to sign autographs once or twice a year, things like that, where it's truly just not in the spirit of what NIL was intended to be. And I mean, that's really what we're seeing with this kind of arms race for high school talents, and also the transfer portal now as well.
I think you made some excellent points there. Um, One is that at least initially, first of all, you mentioned about that maybe what Texas and A&M did was legal by the letter of the law, but is it really in line with what the intent is? I mean, when we talk about NIL, and for those of you who don't know what NIL is, it's name, image, and likeness, and which is really all about endorsements, brand endorsements in one way or another, whether it's using pictures or advertisements or whatever. And you know, when people are just, people like boosters and whatnot are just throwing money at these kids uh, without actually implementing their name, connecting their name to their brand or something. It's just, it's frustrating because schools who are, trying to do it the right way are going to lose out and they're going to miss out. And so for me, I'd like to see the NCAA provide much clearer guidance. And I'd also like them to maybe implement some penalties for schools that decide to do it another way. When I've talked to a lot of people who continue to, and maybe they're just not wording it right and they understand it, but a lot of these people that I talk to will be like, well, the school's paying them NIL money or whatever, and it's like, no, the school can't pay them NIL money, and I think you outline it very good in your article that you wrote. And maybe you could just kind of go over some of those highlights and talk about what is legal, like with the new stuff that the NCAA just came out with, and try to maybe clarify, really how it stands right now, and maybe give some thoughts on where you see it going.
For sure. Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, the NCAA finally did come out with some more updated guidance on really just kind of trying to clarify the role of athletic departments with collectives and fundraising in general. In the past, there really was no kind of direct like outlining of what schools were allowed to do. And honestly, with the updated guidance, it's actually probably more lenient towards schools and what they're allowed to do, what coaches are allowed to do than really they were even hoping for. Because right now, so athletic directors and athletic departments can't directly fundraise for collectives. No employees are allowed to be directly employed, or employees of the athletic departments are allowed to be directly employed by these collectives. But they are actually now allowed to out explicitly say hey, we support this one collective, and they can negotiate meetings or help to facilitate these meetings between donors and collectives. And so, I mean, what we're seeing is there's actually a recent one where the University of Texas at Austin, they used to have 5 NIL collectives that were sort of official collectives. A couple of them were sport specific, but regardless, they decided to all merge together and form just one large University of Texas collective. And athletic director Chris Del Conte actually came out and posted on Twitter saying hey, we officially recognize this collective as the official collective of the University of Texas. And when you put it out there on social media like that, UT being the big brand that it is with hundreds of thousands of followers, now fans can literally go to the website of this collective and donate either to a specific sport or to just the general NIL collective fund. And so really with this updated guidance, it really just allows these athletic departments and administrators to more directly support collectives in the fundraising effort.
That's awesome. So just to be clear, I mean, I think the waters are still kind of murky. And I think that people don't understand that donors, big donors are now kind of being asked to donate twice. Mm-hmm. Once to the athletic department to make sure that there's enough funds for new facilities to stay, at the leading edge of facilities, because all the kids love to have the nicest and latest and greatest stuff, for team travel, for recruiting, to the cost of recruiting, for new equipment, everything like that. And then they're asked to be generous again, open up their wallets again to donate to these collectives, so that the kids can get paid. So it's kind of a two-sided coin that they're being asked to flip, and once hope it lands on one side for the school and the other side for the players, but it's gotta land on both sides at some point in time, for these donors, especially the big money donors that have the ability. because all the great facilities and everything, it used to be that's what drew the kids in, was great coaches, great facilities, all that kind of thing. But now that's not enough. And so collectives for me is kind of a bit of a new word. And so just to make sure that I'm understanding it and whoever else is watching this, maybe you can talk a little bit about, collectives and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're alone in kind of having a sort of abstract idea of what collectives are. I don't really know if there's like a concrete definition, but I mean, pretty much that is what it is. It's just these groups of wealthy alums that are coming together, and they seem to be explicitly formed for recruiting purposes. I think a lot of these, as you mentioned, are donors that used to be donating to the school directly for facilities and whatnot. They had to make sure they had the barbershops and water slides in the locker rooms and stuff. But yeah, I mean, they're coming together, and in the past, I think that they've not officially kind of had ties to the school in terms of determining what recruits they want, things like that, and offering these NIL deals. There's I'm not sure if they actually had any ties or not to the coaches and stuff when it comes to making those decisions and stuff on which recruits. And actually, I think I've heard a couple stories now where these collectives have kind of offered certain recruits that the coaches themselves kind of hadn't chosen other prospects over, especially with like the quarterback position and stuff like that. So there can be a little bit of conflict there. But I think actually with these new NIL guidelines and stuff, these collectives have more power in actually making those decisions with coaching preferences in mind. But yeah, really just these groups of wealthy alums who are donating to the school, and really with kind of more official recognition for some of these collectives, it actually allows for the more everyday fan as well to contribute to those pools.
Yeah, that's great. And that's kind of what I'm seeing. And I think that one of the things that you mentioned in your article is that and you mentioned it here too, is that the athletic department can arrange meetings with donors and the collectives.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically what is not allowed is getting the players involved. Arranging meetings between potential players or current players and donors.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to go through official channels and whatnot. And I think the other thing that is important is, kind of almost, I don't know about some of the younger coaches, but I know some old school guys like Coach Whittingham at Utah isn't going to be, swayed by some big donors who maybe want certain players that may or may not fit the system that they're in. So what are your thoughts on how that might change, have an impact on the system, the way the coaches are coaching, and possibly then having to change coaches more often? And I mean, there's just a whole bunch of can of worms almost.
Absolutely. I think you definitely touched on it. There's and going back to my loyalty to Texas A&M, we've had some locker room problems ourselves this year, especially with this freshman class. And for your audience that might not know, A&M actually signed the highest rated recruiting class of all time last year with like 9 5-stars, depending on the service. And I mean, it was ridiculous amount of talent. And a lot of that talent has had a pretty good freshman year, despite the actual win-loss record not representing that. But we have had some problems with multiple guys from that class that have been suspended multiple times. A couple of them, actually 4 of them, are currently suspended indefinitely. Some of them might not even, be invited to be back on the team at all. And so you're definitely seeing some of these kids that have, a lot of these 5-stars and stuff that come from these backgrounds where they've always been the dude. And, you put a lot of these guys in the locker room at the same time, there's going to be a lot of egos in that locker room, and that can lead to some problems and stuff. And it's harder than ever really for coaches to manage that with more talent, but also now with the transfer portal as well. I think it's just kind of amplifying the issue, adding two so significant changes to the college football landscape at the same time with the NIL and with the transfer portal. So now you're not only recruiting, those high school recruits and stuff and trying to determine whether or not they're going to be fits for as a coach, but then also you have to continue to recruit those kids once they're in your locker room, because there is tampering and stuff going on with other coaches trying to lure players from your school to their school via the transfer portal without having to sit out now. And NIL is every bit involved there as it is with the high school recruiting as well, if not bigger, because some of these guys are superstars by the time they're in college and stuff, with, Jordan Addison or some of these guys that Bama's gotten, like Jahmyr Gibbs. And yeah, so it definitely has changed just kind of the general roster management role. And it's going to be increasingly hard for some of these coaches that do want to stick to adhering to kind of their culture and their values as a program in the age of NIL, because it's going to be harder to get these kids that are both talented and fit culturally, because they are going to be offered these massive deals to go elsewhere. And so, I think there is a very good chance that it's going to just increase that divide between the haves and the have-nots in college football. And personally, I don't know if that's a landscape that is good for the sport.
You made a couple of great points and kind of, popped up some ideas in my head. First of all, I love how you touched on, the divide between the haves and the have-nots, because the haves are going to have even more now because they can afford it. Big money programs like Texas and Alabama, a lot of the SEC schools, they're going to be able to afford the better players, which is going to separate that talent gap even more than it already is. So we're less likely to see, the dark horse come and, have an upset and get to the CFP and maybe even win the national championship. So I think, and that's always kind of fun unless it's your team that they're upsetting. But, nonetheless, it does create for interesting storylines and that kind of thing. And, even if you're a super fan of your alma mater or whatever, it's still kind of fun to look at the rest of the conferences and, see, well, who's going to upset? Ooh, so-and-so is having a really good year. And they're going to take Clemson out this year, or they're going to take Bama out this year or whatever. And, like Tennessee did before failing miserably against, South Carolina. But, there's a lot of stuff like that. And when it comes to recruiting and like the transfer portal, when you were talking, it kind of made me think that, coaches were not allowed to talk to players and try to get them to come to their school when the player was already at another school, off limits. And like you said, there are some things that, still kind of happen that shouldn't. And we know there's coaches that, do things that shouldn't. Herm Edwards at Arizona State was a good example of, like in-person recruiting during COVID. The rules were clear, but he still did it, even though he said, well, I didn't know about it. Doesn't matter. You're the head guy. You should know about it. But the thing that you made me think of is that with these collectives, maybe that's kind of an outside channel where a collective from one school could contact a player who's, on scholarship at another school and say, hey, we'll pay you more if you come and play for us. It seems like you're a little disgruntled. Maybe you're not getting the playing time or the exposure that you'd like. Come and play for us and we'll pay you more. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is just way wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, going back to a certain Pac-12 program that may or may not have taken the best receiver in the country last year, I would not doubt that the head coach of that program had no contact with that player before, because, it is, especially with, all the technology we have and stuff, it would be pretty easy to figure out exactly whether or not they had contact. You could definitely, look at evidence and stuff like that. And so I think a lot of these coaches are very careful in what they do, and whether or not it's for a good purpose or not, they're going to do enough to protect themselves from any blame in that situation. Unlike, actually, speaking of Herm Edwards, I actually saw yesterday that at Tennessee, Jeremy Pruitt, there have been all those rumors that he was handing out cash to recruits in McDonald's bags, but they cleared it up. It turns out it was Chick-fil-A bags. So
Much better.
Much
Much
better.
better.
Yeah. So yeah,
Absolutely acceptable since
better
it was
for
Chick-fil-A, right?
sure. Yeah, my pleasure, right?
Brother. Yeah, there's a lot of and in college basketball, from a Pac-12 standpoint, Utah has lost players to
Mhm.
Arizona. And it's some of the messages I think from the players who went there was because they didn't get paid enough, we didn't offer them enough, we didn't offer them anything. It's
Mhm.
like we don't, when Larry Kraskowiak was our coach, that's not how we operated. And I don't think, our current coach, Craig Smith, operates that way either. But, it's like certain schools are willing to do certain things to get the victories and to, be big time programs. And, it is a changing landscape for sure. And one other thing that you touched on in your article is not, when we think of NIL, or at least when I do, I think of college.
Mhm.
But you mentioned some high school players that are getting NIL money before college, and what collectives are driving that? Is it collectives, associated with certain colleges? Probably in some cases, I'm guessing. I can't remember if you mentioned that or not in your article, but you talked about LeBron James, and I wonder if he's going to go to the G League for a year instead of college. Although, he does have interest in some colleges, I think Ohio State, among others, if I remember correctly. But give me your thoughts on the high school NIL stuff.
For sure. Yeah, no, the high school is arguably even more cloudy than the college landscape right now when it comes to NIL, largely because at least the college level, NIL is now legal in all 50 states. But at the high school level, it's actually a state by state decision. And so as of right now, I think that just over 20 states allow high school players to make money via NIL, but that's literally changing by the day. And even since I wrote that article, I think 2 or 3 states have approved it, and more are planning on making decisions over the next couple of months. But I'd say at the NIL or the high school level, NIL is less driven by collectives unless it is for recruiting purposes. Some of these rumors have it some of these quarterbacks are getting offers of even $10 million from collectives to come play at their school. So there's definitely that aspect in the recruiting side of things. But in terms of just high schools, players signing these NIL deals, a lot of them are brand deals. And honestly, that's kind of more pure and adhering to the spirit of NIL, what it was meant to be, which was allowing these players to sign with local businesses and things like that to make some money, but also, actually do these advertisements and sponsorships with these companies. And so LeBron James, his son, LeBron James Jr., I wonder who his dad is. But he actually signed a deal with Beats by Dre, the headphones company. And rumors are that the deal was for like $10 million or something like that, which is massive, massive amount of money to give to a kid who's a high school senior right now.
Right.
And so, I mean, he definitely has the option of going to the G League, like some of these players have been doing so over the past couple of years. But he could also go to Ohio State, which I guess is where he goes if he goes the college route. Um, but that wouldn't affect so much his deal with Beats or anything like that. He'd still have that deal. And Beats actually they signed a few other athletes as well as part of that deal, and same with Nike.
Mm-hmm.
But even just more local stuff, you're seeing. There's a receiver from Louisiana, Shelton Samuelson Jr. He 5-star committed to LSU. He signed multiple deals with just local Louisiana companies. I think like 3 or 4, and I think upwards of $100,000. But these are like local restaurants, banks, things like that. And I mean, and that is more pure and in the spirit of NIL, which is allowing a player who has so much talent, so much ability, and has sort of that media presence and stuff that makes him valuable as an advertiser, and allowing him to make money off that image that he's built up. And so Louisiana is one of those states that allows it. Same with California, a couple other states as well. And actually, it's inspiring some kids who, to either graduate early from high school and go to college because their state does not allow them to make money via NIL in high school, which in Texas actually does not allow it. And so Quinn Ewers, part of the reason he graduated early and went to Ohio State was because he couldn't make money his senior year with NIL. And so he graduated early, went up to Ohio State, and has since transferred back to Texas. But you're seeing more players make those decisions to graduate early, or to even just move and transfer in high school altogether and go to another state that allows it while they're still in high school. and that's actually showing up, kind of affecting their college decision as well, where they're moving to a state that allows it, but then they're staying there for college as well. You move to Louisiana to make money in high school, and then you stay there for college and go to LSU, and so that's going to, I think, probably spur more states to allow high school athletes to do it, just because it's going to be a competitive issue where they can't keep up with states, both the high school level and college level, that allow high school players to do this.
That's all all very interesting to see how that evolves. I think you made a great point when you talked about how like Bronny's deal was a brand deal with Beats, and to
Mhm.
me that is pure NIL.
Mhm.
And it's great for local companies and businesses who don't have the budget that a national company does, to be able to kind of get a win-win, to team up with a high school player that's well known, that's probably going to go play at a big college in whatever his or her sport is, and they get a little bit of money. The restaurant or the local business gets a little bit more recognition because hey, they got a whole bunch of followers on Instagram or Twitter or whatever social media they're big on, TikTok, whatever. So I think that's all interesting. One other thing that I kind of was thinking about with regard to the transfer portal and these collectives, it's almost like that could work both ways, because there might be a guy who, hey, I'm this 5-star freshman, I should be playing now. Um, but maybe if their deal's good enough from the collective, they sit and wait it out and they don't transfer because maybe they can't get enough money elsewhere, for any number of reasons. Maybe that other schools that they might want to go to already have people who are very good players, who are very good and entrenched in that person's position, and they wouldn't be able to play there either. And or they're not getting, wouldn't get as much money. And so maybe they have a little more patience in some cases, where they stick around for another year or two because the money's good and that's helping. But then they can continue to develop their game in that system they're in, and then ultimately hopefully end up playing, but rather than transferring. So what do you think about a positive, as I might see it, on the NIL side?
Yeah, no, I will say, I think this is actually something that we're going to get to see in real time, over the next couple of months. Um, Looking back at A&M, a lot of these deals and stuff are structured in a way to where the players don't get the money all at once. It's sort of supposed to be spread out in a way that makes them stay. But at the same time, though there is a lot of flexibility in NIL deals and stuff and what these collectives are offering, it's still not allowed to pay a player to play for your school. And so, I think that, with A&M, how much talent we have, so many of these freshman players that, either disciplinary issues or whatever else, I think there are going to be players that leave in the transfer portal. And I think it'll be interesting to see how these are handled, because these deals and stuff, the collectives can't really take away these deals. And so if a player, has signed, let's say, an $8 million deal, roughly $2 million per year, at least that's what it was intended to be, to stay at the school, at A&M for 4 years. If a player leaves and the collective tries to pull the rest of the deal because they didn't stay, they sort of have a basis to sue, and because that would be against the anti-pay for pay to play rules. And so, I think it'll be really interesting to kind of see how that's handled. Because there is a lot of flexibility, but that is still not allowed. And so that's one side of it. But I also think from the player side, I think you're going to be seeing more and more players that enter the transfer portal just because they want to see kind of what's out there in terms of deals and money and stuff like that. But also more so as just a leverage tool. Like players, like if I were Bryce Young, I would have absolutely entered the transfer portal last year with no intention of ever leaving Alabama, but just knowing that I'm going to be offered all these massive deals that I can then come back to Alabama and say, look, what I'm getting offered elsewhere, you gotta improve what you're offering me. And so just from a pure leverage standpoint, I think the transfer portal is going to be used in that way. And honestly, if I were a player, I can't blame them. It's you always just gotta, for a lot of these guys, this is the the time period of their life where they're going to be making the most money. And so just kind of soaking up every dollar of that they can, while in this position is going to be crucial for their long-term financial security.
It's almost like, first of all, I'm glad to hear that there's the anti-pay for play thing attached to the collectives, because that's something that I think is definitely needed. But it sounds like a lot like, free agency, and however, I know that there are some coaches, and Whittingham at Utah, with few exceptions, is one of them, where if you enter the transfer portal, you're as good as gone.
Mm-hmm.
There, he has made a couple of exceptions for very kind of specific things. Like one guy entered the transfer portal. He was going to transfer closer to home. I think his mom was having health issues or something like that. He was out of Texas,
Mm-hmm.
and he was going to do that. He was also having some, I think, health issues, like with some injuries and whatnot. And he was away from the program for a number of months, decided he wanted to come back. The player council, voted on it and said, yeah, we're happy to take him back. And he's been playing again. So, I mean, there are exceptions, but, you as a player, if you really want to be at the school you're at, and you're just feeling like, hey, I'm going to test the free agent waters and see if I can get a little bit more, for a negotiating position, you have to be wary that there is a risk that maybe the coach won't like that tactic and will say, nope, see ya. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. So, so
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's once the player does enter the transfer portal, there, the school's commitment to that player in terms of honoring that athletic scholarship, it's immediately dissolved. They're no longer required to maintain that. And so I think you will see situations like Witt at Utah, where coaches do require, or they don't allow players to come back. And I think that's kind of just speaking of the transfer portal more broadly. It's a lot of these players are hoping to enter the transfer portal, go elsewhere, and the immediate stars at some star program and stuff. And for most players, 85% of players, that's not going to be the case. And so I think you're going to see, I think this year will be absolutely wild in terms of the players entering the transfer portal and stuff. But I think it's going to take a few years for it to kind of settle and show just how many players have tried to leave for greener pastures just to see that the gate closes behind them, and they have made a pretty bad decision in terms of their future in football.
right. Also, when you talked about, the collective's commitment to the players, even if they decide to transfer,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to make the collectives think a little longer and harder about the kind of deals they structure and such, if only because, hey, if they are paying out big money to a bunch of players that end up transferring, ultimately the coffers are going to run dry, and they're not going to have money to attract newer current players.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that could be a challenge as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think kind of the same thing with the transfer portal. It's going to take a few years for this brand new market to really kind of settle itself out. But even a school that has just plenty of money where running out will never be an issue. They're still not going to be happy to see a player that they've already paid all this money to and are still paying all this money to playing somewhere else and doing very well there. Whether it's I mean, whether it's a player that transfers from A&M this year and goes somewhere else, and the collective still has that commitment to the player based on these NIL deals that they've structured, or another school. But I think that it is going to be one of those things where it's going to be, for the next few years, it'll be really rough, and there's going to be, I mean, it's kind of a cliche at this point, but people describing the transfer portal and NIL as the Wild West right now, and I think it's pretty accurate, and I think it'll take a few years for some structure and precedent to really to establish itself and kind of regulate the market going forward.
No doubt, no doubt. So yeah, I think you've got me excited for transfer portal season coming up here in the beginning of December, because that could be a very interesting time, especially with the way NIL has evolved. Yeah, in some cases devolved, but mostly evolved. But so give me some final thoughts on anything that you think should happen, or that you could, kind of go down a line of reasoning that where you can say, I think this has a good chance of happening, or anything at all with regard to NIL and the transfer portal and all those kind of things that we talked about. What do you think we can look forward to here in the future, near or far?
Yeah, no, for good or bad, I think the transfer portal and NIL are both going to be just permanent aspects of the college game going forward. And um, it's a little pessimistic, but I'm as of right now at this pace and the trend that we're on, it does seem like it's going to become a battle of the haves and the have-nots. And I think right now, I'm not sure of specific things that the NCAA or states should do. I think long term, states will all legalize NIL at the high school level. I think that's already well on its way. I think that the transfer portal itself, I just don't think that there's anything the NCAA can do now to kind of rein it back in. I think it would be hard for them to re-implement like um, the 1 year ineligibility rule. NIL, I think there's plenty of room to really just clarify what exactly is allowed. I think that this latest guidance is actually more flexible for schools than most of them even wanted. And I think just continuing to clarify what is allowed, what is not. Something's got to be done about the collectives. I think that's the first step in a positive direction in terms of just putting a lid on this thing. And I think a lot of this is just caused by, again, having the transfer portal and NIL being implemented at the exact same time and just opening up two huge markets of just no regulation whatsoever. Unfortunately, NCAA has just not had a strong track record of making these decisions in a wise way, and then also enforcing any kind of regulation. I mean, because that's another thing. Even with these pretty flexible NIL rules and stuff, most schools are less so kind of thinking about, oh wow, look at all these things we can do, and more so thinking about the fact that it really doesn't matter what you say we can do. You haven't done anything to show us that you're going to actually enforce any of the rules that you're setting. And so I think it's going to be just a rough few years of trying to figure out exactly the role that both the transfer portal and NIL will play. And I think for a lot of players and programs alike, they're going to get burned in the process. And that's unfortunate. It really is. But I think it's just kind of a necessary sacrifice to make for kind of figuring out exactly what that role is going to be going forward.
Gotcha. That's a lot of great points, and I agree with you on about everything that you've said. That needs to happen, should happen. I'm a fan of the free market, but I
Mm-hmm.
also think that we need to make sure that what we're doing is right and fair,
Mm-hmm.
and that there aren't people out there taking advantage of things and doing things that really, whether or not they're illegal, they probably should be illegal, or there should be some kind of at least ethics behind decisions that aren't in a lot of situations. And so yeah, I do think there are definitely times and places for regulation, and I think we definitely need some good guidance, and not just saying this is what you should do, but actually have regulations and actually enforce them. Something the NCAA has not been good at. They let
Concept.
the schools that grease their palms, skate by, maybe a slap on the wrist, and the little guy, they make an example out of them, if they have any kind of a hiccup in recruiting or whatever. So, hey, Trey, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts and expertise with us on that. And as this whole situation unfolds, I'd like to continue to have you back on a semi-regular occasion for updates and such, and keep us informed on the craziness that is NIL.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'd love to be here anytime you want me. And so thank you for taking the time to bring me on and let me rant a little bit about something that I probably spend too much time following. And so again, thank you. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Hey, everybody, appreciate you guys hanging with us and watching the video. I'm going to have a link to Trey's blog down below. It's a great name. It's Pigskin Economics, and there's the link will be down there so that you can follow Trey and everything he's got to say on a variety of issues. What else do you talk about on that on your blog, Trey?
Yeah, so it's really kind of broad encompassing of really just the business behind college football. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with whether it's NIL or media deals, coaching contracts, things like that, that a lot of people will be pretty interested in actually kind of seeing the system, how it operates behind when you actually just see on the field.
Yep. Great news. Great stuff. And he's also, his writing style is kind of fun to read. So check it out and subscribe to his newsletter. And Trey, we'll look forward to talking to you next time. Hopefully A&M, for your sake, is able to recover, have a better season next year. And, hopefully bowl season and transfer portal season is fun for all of us. And you have a great rest of your weekend, your holiday weekend, and we'll catch you soon.
Absolutely. You as well.
All righty. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.